And then I'll be sharing my screen. Oh, oops, what is happening here? Can everyone see my screen?
I
No.
can't see it.
Yeah,
No.
I can see people.
Can you
Right.
see the slide BPX backpacking section?
Uh,
No. No.
Louise,
No?
you just
Okay.
say you.
Okay, hang on a second. I need to go back here.
okay, now I see it.
Okay, can you see a slide called BPX backpacking section?
Yes.
Mhm, mhm.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the first of our 2026 season for BPX backpacking section educational events. So welcome everybody. And you'll see at the bottom left of the screen, that is our email address, cmcbpx@gmail.com. So if you have any questions after the meeting, please email that email address and we will get back to you. So if everyone could please mute their Zoom. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and I will monitor that while Dan is doing his presentation and ask him those questions. Then we can have a group chat at the end. So first of all, in case we have new people on the call, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the backpacking section. So we are the backpacking section, not the backpacking school, and that always confuses people. And if there are any new members on the phone, I highly recommend going to the event tomorrow night at CMC, which is it's the new member night, and they're now calling it Explore. So I highly recommend going there, and somebody will be representing the backpacking section there as well. So what do we do? Backpacking trips, camping, and hut trips. So last year, 2025, we offered 47 backpacking trips, 3 camping trips, and some gear checks early season. And those trips were from 1 to 5 nights. And we were in Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. So that's a pretty standard program for us for the year. We have some signature events. So in March, we invite all our trip leaders to a trip leader summit. And we have a nice gathering with the trip leaders. We talk about new routes and places we've designed and hear from them how we can help them in the season. And then following that, we have a summit for the BPX members. And we're doing that in May this year. And this is for all members. We also link to people not in the Denver area by Zoom so they can join in. And we have as many trip leaders as we can present on the trips that they're planning. And we do some education as well. So I encourage everyone to attend that if they can. And then we do an end of season party and see where you've all been. And that's normally in October. And we do more stuff, but we'll see what happens this year, see what we get planned. And then on the right side of the screen, you'll see the educational events that we have scheduled so far. So Dan will be talking to us tonight about the winter hut trips. And then we have winter backpacking at the end of the month. Wayne Howell is going to be presenting that. And then in February, we have Cal Topo navigation, and Craig Townsend is going to train us on Cal Topo. And we're already working on some more educational events as well. And if you have something you would like us to do for a Zoom or an in-person event, please let us know and we'll try and put it on. Then we have the monthly backpacking section newsletter. So be sure to sign up for that in your profile. We also have a Facebook page, and you can find everything about our section if you scroll down to the special interest sections on the CMC website and then you'll find our page and a calendar link, which will only have the backpacking section events on it. And you get all of this for $20 a year. So huge value. And we are very pleased to have you all joining us. And then one final slide. If you want to help us out, we would love to hear from you. I've already heard from a couple of people this year, and we're talking about having you plan events and social media for us. So if you think you can help us, please contact us, and we'd love to have you. So I am going to stop my screen share now, and Dan is going to take over. And while he is planning on getting ready, I will introduce Dan to you. You probably caught sight of him on the Zoom call, and you may be very surprised to hear that despite his young years, he's been a trip leader for 26 years. And he leads hikes, snowshoe trips, backpacking trips, and winter camping trips, and of course, hut trips. He also teaches in the Backcountry Incident Management School and the Wilderness First Aid Program. So Dan is a native Coloradan, and being from Colorado, he's done some crazy Colorado things. So here's just a couple of them. He has summited Mount Evans, his first and only 14er, on a road bike. And he's also pedaled over the Snowy Range Pass in Wyoming during a July snowstorm. So I think it's fair to say that Dan loves being out in the snow. So I'm going to hand over to him now, and we'll hear how he plans hut trips. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Louise. Can you see the slide that says winter backpacking without tents?
I can.
You can. Okay, good. Not my King Super shopping list, so that's great. Okay, yeah, so let's begin. Tonight's presentation is on winter backpacking without tents, an expert's guide to hut trips. If you are a trip leader for BPX and thinking about leading a hut trip, this presentation will help you to get started. If your goal is simply to participate in a hut trip, this presentation will give you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes, the behind the scenes planning, behind the scenes preparation, and help you to better support your hut trip leader when you do go on a hut trip. But one of the questions some of you might be asking is, well, why would I take a winter hut trip? Well, hut trips are popular in part because they're perceived as being quote unquote easier than full-on winter camping and backpacking. But they're also a good way to get outdoors in the winter for an extended period of time. And like all CMC trips, they are a great way to socialize and meet other people. I will skip the bio stuff because Luis did a good job of covering that. One correction, I've only been a trip leader since 2019, so 6 years, not 26 years.
Okay, my mistake. I thought you were much younger than that.
Yeah, either that or I made a typo on the bio that I sent you, but who knows? Okay, so the outline for tonight's presentation. The main things we're going to cover is how to select a leadership team, how to book a hut and fill the trip, how to prepare for the trip, logistics in taking the trip, post-trip follow-up, and then Q&A. Although I may opt to pause at certain midpoints in the presentation if it looks like we're getting a lot of chat questions. So if you have questions, just pop those in the chat as we go, so you don't have to try to remember them to the very end. Before continuing, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Carol Adler and Frank Brzezinski's role is the quote unquote founders of the current version of the Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang hut program. Obviously, CMC's been around for well over 100 years, and I have no illusion that Frank and Carol were the first CMC members to lead hut trips. But my experience is through leading hut trips for the Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, and the current version of the program was basically set up by Frank and Carol, who have subsequently trained and handed that off to other successors, who you will see pictured in the slides tonight. But I'd also like to acknowledge, and I believe I saw on the roster for tonight's program, or as participants, my co-leaders for this year's trip, Wayne Howell and Jeff Lickenbrock, as well as R.A. Burrell, who is our latest hut leader in training. I know there are numerous alumni from hut trips and backpacking trips that I have led here tonight. And there are several leaders and instructors here tonight who have contributed to my development as a CMC leader. So thank you for your support, all of you. Okay, first thing we want to look at tonight is selecting a leadership team. And one of the questions that might come to mind is, how many leaders does it take to run a hut trip? I would say at minimum 2 leaders for a small trip, and as the trip size goes up, definitely more. If you're leading a group to a smaller hut that has space for 8 people or maybe 12 people, 2 could work, although by the time you get up to 12 people, I personally would prefer to have a third person on the leadership team. When we did Francie's cabin last year, we actually had 3 leaders plus 2 hut leaders in training. So leadership team of 5 for a hut that held 20 people. There's just a lot of moving pieces compared to a regular backpacking trip. And huts generally hold a lot more people than what we take on a typical backpacking trip. Qualifications for hut leader, definitely proven track record as a CMC winter trip leader, meaning you would have at minimum avalanche terrain avoidance or higher, but also optimally experience leading overnight trips. Does each and every leader on the trip need to meet all of those prerequisites? Not necessarily, because a lot of times we're bringing along 3rd or 4th leaders to the team who are learning. So, for example, last year, I believe when we recruited Jeff Lickenbrock, he was still working on his ATA requisites, which was fine because he wasn't the main leader. He was just an auxiliary leader. But definitely those are things you want to shoot for, particularly as we develop hut leaders over a period of time. Okay, booking a hut. And I should point out that, and I'm looking at my notes here. Yes. We are focusing tonight primarily on 10th Mountain Division Hut Association huts. There are other huts where you could take groups. The Summit Hut Association, for example, which up until this year did their reservations through the 10th Mountain Division, but now has their own system for making reservations. Some places around the state, such as State Forest State Park, have a number of hut, cabin, yurt options. Some of you are probably familiar with Bar Camp down on the route up Pikes Peak. And Colorado Mountain Club has a couple of huts of its own, namely the Brainerd Hut. Debbie,
Debbie, could you mute, please?
you need to mute. Thank you. It sounds much better. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, CMC has a couple of its own huts, namely the Brainerd Hut and the Aristua Hut, that are managed by the Boulder section. So this evening's presentation is focusing primarily on doing a trip with okay, let's try that again. Somebody's got their microphone on, and consequently I'm echoing. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, so tonight's trip is focused primarily on, or tonight's presentation is focused primarily on running trips through the 10th Mountain Division. If you were to choose another hut outside of the 10th Mountain Division, a lot of the elements that we talk about here would be applicable, but the booking and reservation process would be a little bit different. We are talking also specifically about winter hut trips, which are peak season for 10th Mountain Division. And so to book a winter trip, there is a lottery system. So the first thing you want to do is figure out which huts will work for your group. In Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, we look at a couple different variables. We're generally looking for huts that are 3 miles or less from the trailhead. So no more than 3 miles to get to a hut. Generally no more than 1,200 feet in elevation gain from the trailhead to the hut. We are looking for snowshoeable routes, but a lot of huts are actually more conducive to skiing rather than snowshoe in. And as a BPX leader, if you have skills in skiing, you may wish to organize a ski trip rather than a snowshoe trip to a hut. So that would be a different variable. Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, we specifically avoid huts that have routes that would take us through avalanche terrain. And we look for huts that have trailheads within a reasonable driving distance of Denver. The people you have in mind for your hut trip may have different abilities or be willing to drive further to get to a trailhead, or may be able to ski rather than snowshoe. So your criteria for selecting a hut may be different than the criteria that I use. That being said, once you've identified huts that will work for the kind of trip that you want to do, then you go to the 10th Mountain Division webpage, you download the lottery form, or you fill out the online version of the lottery form. And basically, there's two things that they're looking at. So you would normally list the huts that you want in the order of preference. You would list the dates of your availability in order of preference, and then you would let them know, do you want them to consider date first and then hut, or hut first and then date? That may sound a little bit confusing, but when you read it and look at the examples on the online forms, it's pretty straightforward. For peak winter season, Rocky Mountain Hill Gang, in the 4 years that I have applied for hut reservations, has always been able to get a reservation for one of the huts on one of the dates we requested. The thing that works for us, I think, and why we've been successful is because most of our members are retired, and so we always request weekdays rather than weekends. And we always put in as many dates possible. The biggest restriction on our leadership team is usually me, because I am still working, and so I've got to work around the academic calendar for my school. But usually, once I figure out dates that will work for me, then I'll ask my co-leaders if they have any blackout dates. And then we'll submit all the remaining dates between January and April that were available, as well as the huts that we've identified that work for our group. So having flexible dates, being willing to travel on weekdays rather than weekends. And if you're willing to travel further to a trailhead, like going up to northern Colorado or going over to the western slope, rather than, say, someplace close like Summit County, your odds of getting a reservation significantly increase. Some huts are closed during the summer, but not all of them. And so if you're looking for a summer reservation or a shoulder season reservation, like, say, November, it's generally much easier to just go online and book. You don't have to go through the lottery for that. There is a place on the huts.org website where people who have made reservations and then can no longer use the reservation for whatever reason, because there are no refunds, but you can sell your reservation to somebody else. You can't get a refund if you can't use a reservation. So you can go to that section of the website and check and see if somebody has put up a reservation that they can no longer use and purchase that reservation from them. Okay, once you've got a reservation confirmed, so when you do the lottery, that usually your application needs to be submitted by no later than mid-February. This year, the date is February 13th, which is the deadline for trips that you will take in 2027. So you could still do this, which is why we wanted to get this workshop on the calendar early, so that if anybody's thinking about doing this, you still have about a month to get a reservation. Well, I guess exactly a month as of today to get that in. Once you've got your reservation booked, you usually find out sometime in March, depending on the number you draw in the lottery, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. And then you've got your confirmation letter. Then you go ahead and put that on the CMC calendar, which sometimes means you've got to make a new route and place before you can put it on the calendar and do all the stuff you would normally do for a CMC trip. And then you start to advertise and fill the trip. One note related to booking. I believe, and this would be a question for Luis during the Q&A. I believe that BPX does not reimburse hut trip leaders for reservations. Depending on the section, every CMC section has a different policy. So, for example, with Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, when I do a reservation, when our lottery selection is made and we're booked in March, my personal credit card is billed, and then I submit that information using the normal reimbursement process through Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang. They reimburse me because I can't really float $1,000 cut fee for a couple of months on my credit card. I'm waiting to get people registered and paid. And then we move into advertising the trip, getting it on the website. And as people register and sign up via the website, they pay, and then that money goes back into Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang's account. If there is no reimbursement system, then you just need to work quickly. And so you can collect the money from individual participants so you're not floating that huge amount on your credit card for a long period of time. If there's questions about that, there are some alternative ways that can be done, which I can discuss, but I won't do that unless there's questions about that later. So advertising the trip, you would do the normal things like go through the newsletter, the Facebook page, that kind of thing. One of the things that I do is I intentionally set up the trip so that registration is not open to just anybody, in part because our trips are limited to Over the Hill Gang members, so I don't want somebody to accidentally think, oh, I could do that, sign up, pay, and then they've got to go through the reimbursement process because they weren't an Over the Hill Gang member and they're not eligible for that trip. Because Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang has a high demand for these kinds of trips, we usually run a lottery of interested people in the spring. So people who are interested will let us know. We'll run a lottery. So for example, for this year's trip to Vance's Cabin, we have 14 spots. The first 14 people that get drawn in the lottery get an offer to register if they are no longer able to do it, or at some point down the road, because they booked many months ahead of time. One of the challenges of our demographic is people pull muscles or have come down with illnesses or have family situation or whatever. And a trip that they thought they could do in February, 8 months ago, now they can no longer do. And so somebody has to drop out. If we can find a replacement, which we normally can, we can reimburse them and then sign up the next person on the wait list. If you're a trip leader and you think you might want to use a system like that, I can sit down with you and go over that in greater detail. And I think I already alluded to roster churn. Part of the challenge of booking a trip many months in advance is, again, plans change, circumstances change, people drop out, and so it's good to have a wait list. Okay, let's see. Actually, let's go back. We talked about leadership team and booking the hot, filling the trip. Luis, do we have any questions at this point?
We had a question earlier on, which I think you might have covered. So it was the process, they wanted to know the process of reimbursement for upfront fees paid by the leader for the reservations. So I can just interject here to say it is different for BPX. So
Yeah.
BPX does not reimburse for hut trips. It's just like for leaders who are planning a camping trip or getting permits for the backpacking trip. It's the leader's responsibility to obtain those permits and then request reimbursement from the participants. So we handle it a bit differently to over the hill gang.
On that note, I could say two things then, because I talked about how it works with Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang. Um, but probably most people here are here because they want to run a hut trip through BPX, possibly another CMC section, but not every CMC section will do reimbursements. A couple of ways that we've done it when we didn't want to mess with reimbursement. The very first hut trip I ever did was a shoulder season trip. And I should mention, some huts can only be booked whole hut. And usually for CMC trips, we want to book the whole hut. uh, and then just use all the spots available for CMC members and then recruit a trip that matches the size of the hut. Um, but a lot of the huts you can make individual reservations. And so you may show up at a hut that has 12 beds. And if you and a friend have booked reservations, you could be staying in a hut with 10 strangers. So it's kind of like a youth hostel kind of thing, if you go that route and don't book the whole hut. Um, but the very first hut trip I took, the trip leader who set that up, it was kind of a last minute thing. And so basically what he did, and it was shoulder season, so he just went online and noted that the hut was empty on the particular night we wanted it, booked a spot for himself, sent an email out to individuals he thought would be interested, and said, book a spot, pay for it, send me your receipt, and then I'll add you to the roster for the trip. That will work for shoulder season trips, not for peak season trips. If you're doing peak season and you don't have the reimbursement option, then really you just want to move as fast as you can on advertising, recruiting, and promoting the trip. Um, and just be aware you're probably going to be floating a big chunk of money on your credit card for a couple of cycles because you're not going to get it filled up probably in under 2 months, unless you just happen to have a small group and a list of friends who are ready to go with you on short notice or ready to sign up with you on short notice. And then you would just collect the money like you would for any other BPX trip, Venmo, old school, check in the mail, or whatever. Okay.
Dan, one more question on this topic. When do you open the lottery for the over the hill gang hut trips?
We normally open that. So if we get normally in May, normally we will open that up on the May 1st newsletter and then um, try to run that within the month of May. So I'll say, okay, we'll collect names up to the 15th. Sometime during the second half of the month, we will run the lottery. And then by the beginning of June, we're offering people spots. So typically, it's varied, but optimally that's how it goes in a perfect world. Yeah. Okay. So once you've got your initial group signed up, uh, what do you do to prepare for the trip? You send an email out to the participants introducing yourself and the leadership team, and letting them know they're going to be getting a whole slew of emails. And I'll usually start doing that, like say sometime in the fall, or if the trip is like in April, then I may start doing that after the new year, even. Um, And things that need to be done, usually in the last 2 months or so before trip runs. Make sure everybody has a packing list. Make sure everybody checks their gear. In a lot of cases, people have had their gear in storage since last year's hut trip. It's probably less of an issue in the backpacking section because you've probably been using your backpack and stuff like that over the summer. But pull your stuff out of storage. You don't want to find out that something doesn't work right when you get to the trailhead. We typically organize a couple of training trips in advance, like day hikes, snowshoe trips in advance of the actual hut trip. Those are part training, part gear check, and part team building. So it's a chance for everybody to get out with a 30-pound backpack and snowshoes and see if you can, climb a couple 100 feet at high elevation. Again, most CMC members are generally in good physical condition. So this isn't solely about the training, but it's partly about checking gear, making sure that works before the actual trip, and it's partly about team building. Meal planning, unlike a typical BPX pack trip, hut trips, at least over the Hill Gang hut trips, we prepare group meals, at least for dinner. So individuals bring their own food for lunch and breakfast. We provide coffee in the morning, and we do dinners collectively. So we usually survey the group ahead of the trip, offers some dinner options, people vote. And then once we've decided on what the majority of people want, we divvy up the ingredient lists and assign everybody something to bring. Scouting the hut route and day trips, because usually we try to do day trips from the hut. So over the Hill Gang trips are typically 2 nights, 3 days. So the middle day, the first and last day are in and out. The middle day is usually day hikes, and we may have one or more options depending. But those routes need to be scouted, so that's something that the hut leaders need to work on. We also often, depending on the location of the hut, will fold those into the training trip. So it just depends on how far. Certain kinds of group gear. So those of you who were here at the very beginning when we logged in heard David and Jeff and I talking about water filter and stuff like that. Well, we only need one 10-liter water filter for the whole group. Not everybody has to bring that item, or group first aid kit, or specialized tools that we may want to have on the trail, like snow shovels or things like that. Not everybody needs to bring one, but we need to figure out, there's certain kinds of group gear that we need, and who's going to bring what. Typically, those things are provided by the leaders, but not always. The very first hut trip that I organized was scheduled for spring of 2021. Nobody was vaccinated at the time that we were to be planning for that trip, and so it got canceled. Subsequently, every trip that I've done post-COVID, we've been very diligent about paying attention to COVID protocols, both for the 10th Mountain Division as well as CMC. I think we're at a point where those things are pretty stable and no longer changing every year as they were for a while. hygiene, particularly kitchen hygiene, is a huge thing that we talk about and prepare for, and locating medical facilities in the communities near the huts where we're staying, which we've never needed to use, but should we need to use one, we know where it is up front. We don't have to figure it out. As with any trip at any time of the year, but especially winter, keep track of weather conditions as you prepare for the trip and avalanche conditions if that is relevant. And then put together a trip plan for participants that I usually try to send out a few days ahead of the trip, including backcountry incident management protocols and such. Okay, once the trip is underway, when we arrive at the hut, typically we check things out, do any cleanup that needs to be done. Groups are supposed to clean up the hut before they go, but we always check everything, and if something got missed or needs to be spot checked, we take care of that before we move in and occupy. Um, Once we know what's going on, we give the kitchen hygiene lecture because that is the point at which, because we are not doing individual meals like on a typical BPX backpacking trip, we're doing group meals. So the hygiene lecture is relevant there. We usually figure out when we arrive at the hut who is going to be in charge of what meals, and we divide up the chores: meal prep, cleanup after meals. uh, some people never touch the kitchen. They just work solely on keeping the wood stove fueled while we're there. And in some huts, a super big challenge is melting snow and water purification. If you go to the Shrine Mountain huts like Jay's or Chuck's or Walter's, they actually have running water. Um, but most huts that we have been at, it's go outside, fill up buckets of snow, bring them in, melt it on the stove, boil the water. And that is a huge challenge. If you have 14 people and you need to be purifying 14 gallons of water per day for 3 consecutive days, that is a nonstop job. If anybody has questions about that, I believe Jeff Lickenbrock is here. He is our water and fire man for the upcoming trip, and can brief you further on that. Um, I have been very fortunate as a hut trip leader to never have had any major personality conflicts or anything like that with any of the members on the groups that I've led, which is absolutely amazing. If you put 12 or 14 or 20 people together in a small hut for 3 consecutive days, that seems like a recipe for all kinds of personality conflicts. Um, Nonetheless, it would be wise to be prepared for that possibility. I'm sure something could come up eventually. The fact that I've never had any issues, I think, is a testament to just how well organized CMC and Over the Hill Gang in particular are, and individuals who sign up for our trips seem to have a pretty good idea of what the expectations are, and have always been very cooperative and helpful. Of course, we don't take these trips because we want to deal with logistics like cooking and purifying water and things like that, because we want to have fun. And one of the great things about uh, one of the great things about Doing a hut trip is some of the best snowshoeing of the year, I think, takes place on hut trips because you wake up at 11,000 feet. Someplace that would take you all day to get to on a day trip, and then you'd have to turn around and get back. And when you wake up, you're already there and you can keep going. We've often done moonlight or starlight hikes at night, but it's good to plan for other kinds of entertainment, board games, skits, whatever. Because if you have a lot of people living in close proximity, it's good to keep everybody engaged and occupied. Okay, post-trip follow-up.
Dan,
Yeah,
we have
once
a
you get
couple of
home.
questions before you move on, if I
Oh,
can interject.
absolutely. Yeah,
So, do the huts have buckets for all this snow melting, or do you have to take those as well?
they do. They do.
They do. Okay.
They generally have pretty much we've always been equipped with pretty much everything we need. I think we've always brought hand sanitizer and things like that, but it's always been there when we get there. But we've
Okay.
we've
And what
always
about
brought
the
extra in
fuel for the
case.
stoves?
But tools like buckets and snow shovels and things like that generally are there.
Okay. And fuel for the stoves, what kind of fuel is it, and is that provided?
That's wood, and that's all prepped during the summer. And so if you get there, even in late season, I'm surprised at how much wood is stacked up. Yeah, there's always plenty. We may sometimes need to split wood, but there's always a good supply of wood. Yeah. What else?
Well, I'm not sure if I want to ask this question because it comes from Wayne, but be prepared. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Does he need to bring his own spoon?
Uh, yeah, Wayne should bring his own spoon.
I thought so.
There should be plenty of silverware for everybody else.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, we have always had most of what we need as far as cookware, kitchenware, dishware, so forth. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
That's it for the time being. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're close to wrapping up here. So post-trip follow-up. Um, Yeah, that pretty much looks much like it would for most other BPX trips. Send out a final email to trip participants with any reminders or updates and thanking them for their participation. Set up a way to share photos from the trip. Um, it's often, although we don't do it consistently, haven't done it consistently, but it's often a good idea for leaders to meet and debrief following a trip. I like to designate somebody with good writing skills like Wayne Howell to write a newsletter article post trip. And then, of course, close out the trip on the website. If this is an annual thing, this may not apply to you, but because we do this on an annual basis with Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, most of the time I know what the next year's trip is going to be before we actually execute this year's trip. And so at the end, I'll remind people we have a lottery coming up in May. This is next year's trip. Keep an eye out in case you want to sign up and do it again next year. I also keep an email. So I've got like an email group with like 42 names of people who have previously taken hut trips with me. So if I have openings or anything that need to be filled on short notice, because somebody dropped out, I will email that group, and often somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, I have an opening on my schedule next week. I can do this on short notice." So, yeah. Oh, wait. No,
What's
it's not
happening?
all. It's Q&A. It's Q&A.
Okay, so a couple more questions. And I think you covered this. Is the backpacking section a huts.org member, which allows us to enter the lottery for hut trips a year in advance?
Okay. You do have that's a good question, and I really glossed over that. So thank you for asking that. You do need to be a member of the 10th Mountain Division to apply for in the Hut Lottery. I have done that on behalf of Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang every year. I just consider it a $30. I just consider the $30 huts.org membership a donation to CMC. I don't know if you can be an organizational member. Yeah, that would be worth investigating if you wanted to do that. Um, I don't know if BPX can become an organizational member. I'm pretty sure as an organizational member, you would still only get one lottery application, though. So if you have more than one leader wanting to do a trip, that would be separate applications. Um, and it would be good to coordinate if you do that because you don't want to get. I mean, the odds would be slim, but it could be confusing or awkward if you were running. Well, maybe not for BPX because we do that with backpacking trips. I was going to say if you were running two hut trips on similar or overlapping dates, but we do that with backpack trips all the time, so maybe we'd be okay. We did have one year where Tom and Linda Jagger organized a hut trip with Over the Hill Gang, and I coordinated with them because we didn't want our dates to be overlapping or anything like that. But that was a little bit confusing. So,
Okay, thank you for that. And then one other question, and then we'll open it up. One of the questions is about earplugs and snoring. How do you handle that? And do you recommend people bring earplugs, or how do you handle that situation?
yeah. So I snore. So definitely, if you're on my trip, you want earplugs if that bothers you. Um, yeah, seriously. If I can sleep through anything, but if you're a light sleeper, there will be snoring. Earplugs are an excellent idea. Yeah, it dep a part of the layout the sleeping arrangements will vary from hut to hut. For example, Francie's cabin, um, we had lots of small bed. I mean, we had like a dozen bedrooms. It was insane. So we had like 2 to 4 people per room. But then you've got like Vance's cabin where we're going, and we've got two dormitories, one that holds six, one that holds eight. So you can pretty much hear everything. So yeah, it's good to familiarize yourself with the sleeping arrangement and be able to let people know. So somebody really does have an issue, maybe they don't sign up for the trip, or at least they come prepared with earplugs.
Okay, thank you for that. So are we in Q&A? Because we could open it up if people want to have a verbal
Absolutely.
question.
What time?
So
I can't
feel
see the clock on my computer with the PowerPoint up. What time is it?
So anyways, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask Dan a question, now is your moment.
It's 7:25, Daniel.
Thank you.
Hi, Daniel. Gail Wells here. What
Yes.
huts have you done in the years you've been leading the huts?
Let's see. Jay's hut, Francie's hut, Jay's hut twice, Francie's hut once, Vance's hut coming up the second time, and Point Breeze cabin once.
Okay.
Other questions?
So Dan, this is Wayne. I think one of the most important things, and I know you mentioned this to bring across, is when you have all these people in one confined location in the winter, personal and public hygiene is exceedingly important. It's really, really important. So on any of these hut trips, do not, if you're going to be on one or you're putting one together, keep that thing kind of up near the top of your list for communicating with the participants. And then while you're there, making sure that everyone, particularly if someone isn't used to going into a hut, to really does practice really good hygiene because it is so quick and so easy that one or more people can become ill.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, and we've got I mean, in addition to on-site protocol, we've got protocols before the trip. We have one of the reasons why it's good to have multiple leaders is we have had leaders get sick last
Yeah,
minute
very good point.
and not come. I mean,
Any
February,
other
March,
questions?
cold and flu season. So, um, yeah, and it just we ask people if you are sick, yeah, opt out.
Or
I
sleep
mean, we don't
outside.
like to
Or
ask
sleep
anybody
outside.
to opt out, but we don't want you to come if you're sick and then infect everybody else. So it
This
looked like
is April. May I ask a
yes,
question?
April.
So I've actually never done group kitchen cooking with anyone, and I've done like backpacking trips, but I don't really like the idea of doing it because I feel like it's hard, like I don't know how people are washing hands or maintaining their hygiene. And so like what are the protocols in cooking and for sharing, you know, um, to make sure everyone's, take most high precautions. Like do people use their gloves when they're cooking food or like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, at the very basic level, anytime you go into the kitchen to do anything, you sanitize your hands. A lot of the kitchen hygiene is related to the water purification. So making sure like any washing of vegetables or anything like that is being done with water that's been properly filtered and cleaned. And we've got actually a written statement that we go over. A lot of the huts will also have detailed instructions in the kitchen area on what to do, depending on what supplies are available at a given hut or how they want you to organize and do things. So,
Yeah, and
Thank
Dan, I think another important thing that I know is practice too is not everyone is in the kitchen preparing the meals. That is actually a few number of people that are actually preparing the meals, and obviously good hygiene practices by especially those people as well too. I know you mentioned cleaning everything, cleaning the dishes, everything. There's a protocol for that as well too. So like everyone isn't in the kitchen all the time, and I think as long as you follow the guidelines and ground rules, I think you're usually in pretty good shape. I know that we do have sanitizing, hand sanitizer like all over the place as well too. And it just becomes second nature that, okay, you touch something, just sanitize. Yep.
Yeah. And we've never had any foodborne illnesses in any of the trips I've been on, because we've always been very careful. And I think what you said, Wayne, about, yeah, generally there's a very small number of people. I mean, it's a small space, so it feels like everybody's in the kitchen, but there's actually generally a very small number of people doing something in the kitchen at any given time because we divide up the chores and the responsibilities. And yeah.
I'll just add, if anybody's been on a river trip, the organization for hut trips is quite similar to the longer river trips. At least the hut trips I've been on are organized same as river trips because it's usually the same people. But yeah, so you have your teams, the cook team, the cleanup team, the water team, in this case, the wood stove or fire team. Yeah.
Yeah. And that same process is used sometimes with backpacking trips. I don't know if Brian Booker is here tonight, but I know he's done backpacking trips with Andrew Skirka's organization, and they do a lot of, yeah. I mean, you're not as independent in your meals and things like that with that type of organization, a professional outfit. So we're not professionals, but we are doing things more in a group-oriented way than we do on typical overnight backpacking or winter camping trips.
Okay, well, I think we're drawing to a close, unless there's any final questions. So, Dan, I think we all want to thank you very much for that talk. It was wonderful. You may not have seen it, but lots of heart reactions have been floating up on the screen. So, you've been greatly appreciated this evening. Thank you so much for kicking off our season. And if anyone has any additional questions, just send them into cmcbpx@gmail.com and we will get them over to Dan. And while you're at it, remember our next presentation is Wayne Howell on January 26th. So make sure you've signed up for that one as well. Dan, did you have something else?
Yeah, I would like to mention that we currently have 2 spots available on the Vance's Hut trip that's being sponsored by Rocky Mountain Over the Hill Gang, February 25, 26, 27. If you are an Over the Hill Gang member or age 50 or older and willing to become an Over the Hill Gang member, we can get you on one of those 2 slots. So feel free to. I should have put my email on the slide.
We can send any comments directly to you.
I think. Yeah, good.
Oh,
Okay.
there you are. You've got
I just put my email in the chat. So if anybody
perfect. Thank you.
is interested in the Vance's Cabin trip, let me know.
How much does it usually cost per person for a hut trip? Like,
Oh, yeah, so depends on the hut. I think the Vance's Cabin trip this year is like 85 roughly, give or take. Let's see. We've some of the Jay's cabin has electricity and running water. So it's a little bit more expensive. I think that was more like 120. But that's like for 2 nights, so that's not bad.
thanks.
So yeah, it's definitely affordable.
Okay, well,
Okay.
Dan, thank you very much. And we hope to see everybody at the next BPX section and on a backpacking trip or possibly a hut trip if somebody wants to organize that. So
Yeah.
thank you and goodbye.
And remember, huts are just backpacking without a tent.
Mhm.